There we go. All right, it's 12:02 in Vancouver. It is 4:02 on the far east coast with our friends in Atlantic Canada. Before we dive in, I'd love to, honor the lands on which we live, work, and play, which are the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And without further ado, we'll dig right in. So we've got a pretty big agenda today. This is part 2 of our Future Proofing Canada series. This is in direct response to the tariffs and other economic political threats that we're facing, as a result of Trump being elected in the South, as well as some of how other countries are responding, and sort of keeping on pace to make sure that if other countries respond in certain ways, how may that also have some sort of secondary or tertiary impact on Canadian industry, innovators, economy, and all the like. So today's session is called Short-Term Tactics and some other legal considerations. Before we kick off, the National Research Council of Canada IRAP program, thank you for your ongoing contribution and support to the programming we provide. We're doing this series over and above a lot of our relationship work, but this is, without your support, we wouldn't be able to have the team here to do that. So thank you. My name is Jeanette Jackson. I'm your series host, and just delighted to be connecting with everyone today. A little bit about foresight. If you weren't at the last session, we'll always repeat this slide just to keep reinforcing our mandate, which is to help the world do more with less sustainably. And we do that by connecting industry with the world's best clean technologies. And we think that those technologies come from Canada, but we also want to make sure we have our finger on the pulse on global best practices and innovation when it comes to all of the sectors that are important to Canada's economy. We have a pretty big network. We've been around for over 10 years, supporting innovators, supporting industry, the public sector. But you can always reach out if you have questions on our metrics or check out one of our annual reports. And sticking with our session format last week, we're going to do a forum approach. It may evolve over time, but it's really just a place for everyone to connect, convene. We understand that being an entrepreneur, trying to build ecosystems, trying to be an organization that supports Canada's industry and competitiveness is already hard work. And to layer on these types of threats and uncontrollables is really an opportunity for us to come together, convene, be vulnerable, be honest, and figure out how we can work together to be more, to navigate and make decisions that will be best for all of us and allow us to thrive as a country. We are going to do a bit of a session recap. Again, I'm going to work through this stuff very quickly, as well as note a few updates from just last week. We're going to get into some legal and operational considerations. We're going to do a breakout program as well, and then we're going to do a group recap. I've left extra time for group recap as advised by last week's session. And if we get right into the recap, what we did last week is it was just bringing the community together, and we did breakouts by stakeholder group. And what we've heard from the startup group within the first week is that there's an opportunity for new grants and supports to be provided, that we need to reflect on, early stage companies who don't have employees. A lot of the policy framework around deploying capital in terms of grants limits capital for those ideators, those early stage companies, and that we need to be steadfast on the reality that startups are a great pathway to create new jobs and more jobs and high paying jobs. There's also an opportunity, or I think, given that a lot of tariffs are on things that are manufactured and produced, so hard goods as opposed to software and intangibles, making sure we're leaning in on hardware development supports. Some others proposed, the opportunity to support the startup community with maybe tax credits or other credits based on their impact, so number of jobs, maybe export, new markets, that kind of thing. So being creative around policy. And then community investment forums. So what does a new type of investor in innovation and industry look like if we have to, rely more on the 4 million, people across Canada and all the other businesses and and organizations that most of those people work in, or the schools that they go to, etc. And the scale up group, looking for a lot more support on new customer acquisition. So these companies often have customers. So repeating that with either domestic customers or customers in new markets. And also looking at how they can find efficiencies in local businesses. So providing more innovation to our local businesses. Of course, new markets, new products and services. So if a scale up is working and things are working well, if they're serving the domestic market, what new products and services can they add to leverage the capacity of their team and infrastructure and manufacturing, to help, the broader economy. Onshore manufacturing projects, which are definitely, whether it's first of kind or whether it's adding capacity in different regions based on market demand or expertise or where feedstock is, et cetera, et cetera. Just really thinking through some onshore manufacturing projects and faster permits, which I know government partners on here have been hearing a lot of. And I think we're already seeing with the premiers getting together that there's a lot of good stuff happening there. The domestic markets group, really leaning in for interprovincial trade for tech. Also looking at finding companies that if projects do get lost or capacity does open up, that we use that strategically and try to figure out how do we connect people that may be in that situation. And Foresight's definitely keen to play a role there. And we'll be, having our eyes open and fingers on the pulse on how we can make those connections. There was also some commentary that we do need to rely on larger industry to help us create the pathways for all smaller, sort of less capitalized organizations to sort of follow. And so if you think about some of the big companies, whether it's in ag, whether it's in resources, their leadership will set a tone and help set a tone for where the smaller ventures and technology companies will play. We also want to see a ripple effect from momentum and encourage that. So if industry does make big bets, like we expect some really good ripple effect and momentum. How do we quantify that? How do we help government, understand what opportunities there are to sort of kickstart that type of ripple effect? And of course, they have the most purchasing power. So economies of scale, all those things in Canada are now real questions and answers that we need to ask ourselves. Some folks asked us to lobby. We do definitely consolidate information and share that with our government partners across the country. But can we do more of that with more messaging and also connecting you with other great groups like the Canadian Council of Innovators, like Clean Energy Canada? There's some great policy lobbying groups. And so how can we bring tangible programs and action to some of those recommendations that have already been made that make good sense? As we navigate bringing more domestic markets to the table. On government, how do we sort of advise and support government's decisions on removing dependency on U.S. markets? Also, what strategically makes sense. So, we have a lot of technology companies in a lot of different sectors across the country. And so being thoughtful about which top 1 or 2 countries really need us and will value, what we're bringing to the table. Also removing red tape. I know that some government folks last time were sharing lists of resources, so we're working on making sure we can share that in our follow-up emails and session notes, but making sure resources are available and really understanding what trade and procurement tools are available to the sector. And lastly, industry, not least for sure, breaking down interprovincial barriers, really acknowledging the type of capital that's needed, and seeing if strategic capital, and even we do know that some of our pension funds, et cetera, are looking more to the U.S. sometimes to deploy capital. Like, is now the time to encourage and incentivize those large pools of funding to come back and invest in Canadian infrastructure so that industry can thrive? I think some stability around carbon credit markets. Well, I don't think, but that's what they shared. And I'm sure we can all agree getting stability on the value of carbon markets and what role they'll play in business cases and business modeling and financial modeling. And finally, the power of collective voices. So, music to our ears. We're really trying to make sure we acknowledge the unique needs of each of these stakeholders, but also make sure that it's a collective voice, a coherent voice that makes sense so that government can support as efficiently and effectively as possible. And I did want to, we have a team across the country at events. And so I'm going to dig right into all of this right now. Our team member, Sonia, was at a Future of Food and Innovation event today. And this was the sentiment there. And so I think this sentiment is something that it's a good to level set that we're not alone in each province, that we're all, and people are convening and having conversations, and as we can learn and keep thinking top of mind what folks are thinking. I thought it'd be a good slide to add. So in terms of competing globally, what the broad collective thought leadership was around this is that we need to focus on productivity, digital, and export infrastructure, and that agriculture in this case was a very competitive space to enter new markets. So I think helping industry recognize what, again, markets make sense for, and how government can play a role in looking at the right markets where there will be enough margin, where they do have enough buying power, and where it makes financial sense. We don't want to undersell our exports because we're desperate to fill gap capacity. It still needs to make business sense. In terms of urgency and innovation, if we are complacent, I think everyone's aware, and a lot of us have been, really encouraging for the last many years for us to be an economy and a country that leverages innovation to be more productive. But, staying complacent now has a number beside it, which is about a 40% revenue risk. We do need to be a little more ambitious on our comms plan. Canadians traditionally, and I think I said this during COVID too, with input from the team and the network, is we're a little too modest in our value to different ecosystems and industries sometimes. And so being bold on why Canada, and actually I've already seen, if you're not following along, groups like Global Affairs and whatnot on LinkedIn, they're definitely getting ambitious and having fun trying to get the right eyes on why Canada is the place to come. We do need to address the commercialization piece. It's happening too slow, and we need to be data driven, data drive. Forgot the end there. So we need to be data driven. So just let's not, shoot at everything. Let's look at the data, what it's telling us, and make really thoughtful strategic decisions and investments. The financial challenges. So what a lot of folks have been saying for many years is that there's many different buckets of money, and where do I go and where do I start? So there may be an opportunity to look at how we consolidate and streamline funding pathways. Again, whether you're a startup, whether you're industry looking to innovate and adopt innovation, and you need loans, or there's an opportunity for grants if you're looking at supporting a startup and that kind of thing. Let's streamline the opportunity to streamline the process quite a bit. And investor education and confidence, that's important, right? Investors invest where they have confidence in the market, where the market's going. And, again, our team across Canada is getting a lot of indicators because we have capital at the table and we're connecting with projects and opportunities, and they want to know, like, are these projects going to go ahead? Can I rely on this, this big bet to be successful? And then tariffs and policy, which is what's driving our conversation today. We need to address supply management barriers and just continue to reinforce that food, water, and energy security is something that we need to work on together as a continent. And how do we make sure that's top of mind in negotiations? We definitely want to highlight the moving targets. So I can't see everyone on here, but I think all of us have a bit of whiplash this week. I was pretty excited last week that we had a 30-day reprieve to bring people to the table to have conversations. And of course, less than a week later, a new 25% steel and aluminum tariff has been tabled and affirmed. And now, we're starting to hear that might be compounded with the looming tariffs at the end of the month. And so, whiplash is never a good space and a headspace to be making decisions and navigating, but hopefully together, with the right information and a calm response, we can make those adjustments. So going to dig directly into legal and operational considerations. We have consolidated input from several of the law firms and experts that we work with More and more experts will be brought into these conversations in the coming weeks. But what we've done is consolidated some of the tools and areas where you can start to make decisions and act now, at least in terms of getting the data you need to make the best decision for your business and stay above sort of the next venture that might be vying for capital, or the next project that maybe isn't thinking ahead this far. So the reality is we have a framework for decision making, and these are some of the variables. I'm sure there's more. We're just one source of information, but right out of the gate, I think it's been established that the trust has been lost between our biggest trade ally, and it is an unfortunate reality. But at least if we set that as a known in your decision-making frameworks for your businesses and for the programs you're developing to support the sector, there's a lot I think that we can move off the table knowing that that's a reality. In terms of the factors, so for us, there's obviously things that you can control and can't control, and just being honest with yourself, making a list and saying, look, these are the things I can control, and these are the things that I just have no control over. And I think, getting that in writing for yourself on a one page or on a whiteboard just will help maybe streamline and focus your energy into making the tough decisions that need to be made based on what you know, and also factoring in what may be changing, because certain things are so uncontrollable. Internally, what you do have control over is your labor, your materials, where they're sourced, how they're sourced, how you market your business. There's a lot of opportunity there. And the breadth of offerings. Do you go wider, or do you need to narrow your scope of offerings into, the product or technology pathways that will get your investors and your customers the best ROI and allow you to make money and keep your workforce? Externally, things that are a little uncontrollable are things like, interest rates. We hear they're going down, so that could be good, but we also know that can drive inflation. More importantly is the customer responses. Making sure you're connecting with your customers and understanding how they're going to be making decisions is very important. At least 80-20 rule. Your top, well, hopefully they're 20 customers that are 20% or 80% of your potential. But just selecting a few customers and having honest conversations about what type of decisions they'll be making, depending on how things unfold. And of course, government supports. And I know we've got government folks on here. They're trying to do their best to set some tone on types of programs that may come available, but it's still so early. So just keeping informed and following along with our government agencies, both federally, provincially, and at the municipal level where that's relevant. And then in terms of your framework, it's just figuring out, your best pathway based on what you know. So legal considerations. Oh, slide's still in there. My apologies. We're going to jump right into contract law. So something that is very important for you to start to look at is the contracts you have in place on selling your goods and getting the inputs you need to make your goods, whether that's services or raw materials. Do you have force majeure clauses in your contracts? Mapping that out, the list of your contracts and what levers you might be able to pull will be very important for either triggering a renegotiation, or perhaps having the ability to walk away and find an alternative source or partner. Maybe reflecting on your forward-looking contracts. So some of the things that we talked about with our partners on the legal side are price adjustment and tariff pass-through clauses. Will you be able to add in costs based on how the tariff market influences the end product cost of what you're delivering, and who should absorb those costs, and is there some sort of mechanism that makes sense that allows everyone to feel like they're part of the solution and not bearing the full brunt, so that the relationship can stay intact. Governing law and dispute resolution. So, if you have operations across borders or across the country, you definitely want to make sure that you're clear on the jurisdiction that your contracts will apply. And those will be things like arbitration, mediation. It could be sectoral as well. In your breakouts, we are doing sector breakouts today. Feel free to sort of, talk about that in your breakouts. And then what termination and renegotiation rights are there? And, if the contract isn't viable, what makes sense and how do you approach your customers? And obviously we have a network of EIRs and industry experts that can help you with that. But of course, being part of these sessions and being part of the community and talking with your peers is also very beneficial to this. The next legal consideration for business is the trade and customs regulation. So you do need to make sure that you stay up to date on the moving parts from a tariff compliance perspective, and figuring out where you might be able to seek exemptions or reclassify, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. But um, obviously a lot of this is self-reporting, and so you want to find out what the different self-reporting pathways are as you look to seek exemptions and reclassifications. We also know that the new U.S., Mexico, and Canada trade agreement has a lot of tariffs that relate to where raw materials are originating. I don't know if you're following the story about ShearTex in Ontario, Quebec, but they built this. This is obviously not a cleantech company, but I've been following along closely because the CEO has been so transparent about what they're facing, ready to ramp up, now tariffs. 9% of this subset of raw materials is from Asia, and that triggers a whole new set of tariffs for them, even though they're doing all the manufacturing and processing, and like the depth and impact and IP of their work is happening, in Canada. And so these are going to compound, certain markets. And so how do we support, businesses that have these they're on the line of these thresholds? If we can't put pressure on, what can we do to get some of that supply chain built out here in Canada, or encourage our government partners, negotiating policy to push back on some of the margins on these pieces. Retaliatory tariffs, so that's obviously what we expect the government to assess, and then advanced ruling and tariff mitigation. So you can actually in advance, get once you have your proper tariff framework, if it relates to you, how it relates to you, you can figure out, can I get advanced credentials so that I know how to build my business case, moving forward, and have, no unexpected issues, legal, tariff, moving forward. In terms of operational considerations, so we talked a little bit about this last week. We really want to encourage everyone to start looking at diversification and reshoring manufacturing where it makes sense. I know that small batch, niche manufacturing is expensive, but I think as you work through the process of figuring out where your cash cow or where your high valued product or service really is, then you can start to break down the numbers on how to reduce costs in Canada to do that. And it may be a factor as well that there's other costs that, a percentage of your marketing budget. Can that go in? Have you assessed the ROI on all your marketing dollars, and moving some of your operational budgets around to try to build up capacity here in Canada? Getting the finance support you need to navigate those options, and make some bets if it makes sense for you, is definitely an opportunity. Warehousing and inventory management. So if you're producing goods and service, do you stockpile? Do you hedge your bets on certain inputs? That's something that you and your operations team really need to look at. And I, encourage, industry and government side as well, to think about your procurement needs in the next sort of 30 to 60 days, and see if there's some pre-purchase of Canadian, made in Canada goods that you can start to support our innovation community with. And then just logistics and border compliance, just making sure that you have the right partner to help you navigate if you're going to continue to push your sales into the US, or you're importing, any sort of materials from the US. Want to make sure that you have everything as organized as possible. And a lot of the people on this call are earlier stage, so they're just getting into those pieces. But myself, I ran a business that we expanded into the US, and we did a pick and pack, facility across the border. And sometimes I would go and I needed samples, and they would stop me at the border. Like, those things need to be, I'd be like, I'm just using them for personal or marketing. And you need to have your finger on the pulse on what documentation is required. You don't want to be flagged by making shortcuts, and you want to make sure you have the best information and the best partners to move goods back and forth as possible. And then on the tax and financial implications, so transfer pricing adjustments, we talked a little bit as well in your contracts, who bears the breadth of the tariffs, tax credits and duty drawbacks. So just continue to keep your finger on the pulse on tax incentives, and managing your exported goods. So we're importing from the US and back to the US. Like, those things need to be tracked. And as small companies, we don't often have the capacity to look at those things, but maybe now it's talking with your operations team to say, where do we have these instances where it's back and forth and back and forth? And, have we leveraged every opportunity? I see a hands come up. Last thing I'll say here is currency exchange risk. Obviously we're seeing the Canadian dollar fluctuate up a little bit now. It might come down, and we'll see how it goes. Go ahead and ask your quick question. Oh, if you can do it in the chat, that would be great. I see a lot of people already sharing chat, so I'm going to continue, but in your breakout, ask the question. The last thing, labor laws. So we import $10 billion in services from the US, more than we export to them. And so understanding if you need to move your service supports back to Canada, there's in the US, there's more sort of at will versus just cause, requirements. So you may not need to pay out as much as you would if you're managing costs by reducing your Canadian staffing. And so you can basically let people go or transition them out of a contract much more closely. If you're larger at scale, there's a lot of right to work states and unions. So if you're just looking at scaling in the States still, understanding the labor laws, and if you need to make quick decisions and pivot where you manufacture or the amount of people that you're hiring, make sure you do that in states that have, I'm saying this with as much grace as possible. This is a bit of a cutthroat approach on the business side. Obviously, labor laws and quality and taking care of your team is number one priority. If you have pressure and you have to make decisions, you want to make sure that those decisions can be made with as much flexibility to treat everyone fairly. But some states are much harder than others. And so if that's important to you, you need to take a look at which states make sense to scale up manufacturing and hiring if you need to make short-term cuts. And then making sure that you're really up to speed on any talent you have, any team members you have that are on visas or LMIAs for Canada. Just make sure you understand sort of where that's at, and either continue to push that process and track, all those HR files accordingly. Oof, I've gone through a lot. So summary of actions: make sure you map and prioritize the key inputs and factors and develop your mitigation strategies. Get in there and review your contracts and figure out if you need to update terms for tariff contingencies. Start evaluating your supply chain alternatives now. And next week, we're going to have a lot of people at the table to help you connect with folks that'll help with that. Monitor policies for legal changes and tariff exemptions. It's unfortunately an ongoing piece, and we're going to do our best to share what we can. But right now, they're just such blanket statements that there's no real detail to report. And we'll be relying on a lot of our policy partners to provide that information and share that with you as well. So if it's not a foresight document, but we're sharing it, it may have some pieces in there that are important to you. Engage trade and compliant experts, and consider tariff engineering strategies, which a little bit bold, but do you need to modify your product classifications and change sourcing to avoid the tariffs? All right, we're going to do breakouts. So based on the 200 people that registered, I'm not sure how many we have on right now. We've decided to do our breakouts by sector discussions. so that you can talk about, challenges, strategies, and support needs. If you're a government agency, if you can just try to sort of divide and conquer across all of the sector breakouts, that would be great. Again, we're not sure if everyone who registered attended, so we've done our best. If you're a small group and want to join another group, the admin team here can help with that. The breakout buckets are going to be building innovation, energy and storage, energy and fuels and alternatives, things like hydrogen, agriculture, carbon markets, circular bioeconomy, digital innovation, and water and waste. And it's similar to last week. You're going to click on the buttons when they come available. But here it is. Make sure you have someone that can help join take notes and facilitate the conversation. And the 4 areas that we've sort of identified are things like talent discussions, market discussions, capital, and just overall business viability or market viability. But I encourage you to take the conversation where you need to get it to get the most value out of your time. And I will pass it over the team to break out and see you back here in about 20 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I see that people are coming back. We will close off shortly. This will be recorded and shared with everyone. We may end up going over the next 10 minutes, but just before you leave, next week we have economic development agencies invited from across Canada to come and do breakouts. So if you're BC or an Ontario or a Halifax company and you want to connect with a different sort of region and just talk to the economic development agency and see what's happening, that will be a good time to do that. So we'll share more about that on LinkedIn. And then the next one after that will be cross border. So we're going to have our US friends that we've been working with on lots of different things come to the table and share, how they're seeing everything. And even some companies from the US to talk about what they're facing. And I think it'll be interesting for you to see how many companies want to come to Canada now because they don't know where to go exactly. And Canada has some good agreements in place. So do we have a speaker for the built environment? All right.
Yeah, I can go ahead if anybody else doesn't want to.
Shoot, any notes, either talent markets, capital, or other?
Absolutely. Yeah, just insofar as talent goes, we discussed a little bit about doing what you can in-house to kind of, prepare everybody, mitigate, and then forecast. And then from there, especially when it comes to like viability, be as proactive as you can. There are very real consequences that are happening and that are coming up. But if you can move first from a position of what strength you can gather, that's looking like the best option. It was a riveting conversation in there.
Okay. Energy storage.
Okay, yeah. 2 main focuses. One is the potential loss of capital coming from U.S. investors. There was a couple of folks who had concerns about that. Everybody else was zeroing in on market and the potential loss of market. There was 2 directions that came out of that. One was, all right, let's look to Europe. There's seem to be a number of conversations that are happening between Canada and various European or EU opportunities. So there's definitely discussion along those fronts. And the other was, all right, if you still have a great opportunity in the US, if you're not reliant on IRA funding, if your business stands on its own without government subsidies, then maybe the best option is setting up a US subsidiary and doing local manufacturing in the US. So basically, which, obviously there's Canadian implications to that, but that is a potential opportunity for some ventures, and some people are starting to talk about that as well.
I mean, it's a real decision people are going to be making, and I think it's important our government partners know that, right? So that we can figure out what the impact of that would have. Okay, thank you, David. Fuels. Who's on fuels?
Yeah. So for fuels, we did talk also a lot about market, and the discussion came about how socialized is the market to certain technologies. There was a lot of fanfare for hydrogen a little while ago, but still the rate of it getting deployed is lagging behind. Also talking about further broadening that to other alternative fuels like ammonia, how aware are different markets or potential industries that, green ammonia can be made and it can be a great solution for a number of different applications. And we also talked about just the speed of development of these technologies. Is always sort of a little bit of a chicken and egg situation that we're trying to push forward, identify that end target and develop the technology as well. So wherever we can get clarity for market, that could help Canadian innovators get those technologies out to supply those alternative fuels.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Carbon markets. I heard there was an interesting little breakout there.
Yeah, super interesting. We had two innovators, one focused more on voluntary market, one focused on the compliance market and CCUS more. But the major concern right now, a number are moving forward towards their pilots. They have confirmed pilot stages, and they kind of are concerned that they might just have to take some losses with the manufacturing, uncertain on how to find either Canadian or US alternatives as they're working through that process with very specific equipment. So that was a lot of the conversation. And then secondly was finding capacity for someone to kind of look at these alternatives, and they don't have this capacity in-house. So like, how could other people kind of lean in and support with maybe a database or things like that? And then finally, we talked a lot about uncertainty in the markets with the Canadian election also looming. What does the consumer tax look like? Does the industrial tax, does that get impacted as well? So just a lot of conversations around what that looks like and overall uncertainty over the next 6 months, but even 4 years.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Circular.
Yeah, so for circular, majorly, I believe we have three innovators on the chart, and most of the discussions was just around the uncertainty in markets. Wow, one of the innovators, they are looking to enter into the market in May, and what they're producing is majorly a reusable bladder leak underwear, which is a medical grade A. And they believe they should be exempted from tariff, but a lot of education needs to be done in regarding that. Is it going to be just all, will there be any exemption for some medical equipment, or is just going to be across board? Another concern is around there's a lot of discussion with some companies in the US before now, and they're already upgrading their equipment, updating their systems, and they are wondering how that will affect the current market. Another discussion is around shipping. So there are agreements that have been signed, paid for, and now they're already producing. And if the tariff comes in, when it gets to the border, like in terms of how does that affect that, and also down the road, how does that affect other market in terms of getting more products on that. And generally, I think in terms of others, people are now looking at both production with maybe Asia countries. So Sri Lanka, Vietnam is some countries that some people are already looking at in terms of getting there. However, the concerns has been in terms of the quality. Maintaining the quality it's also a concern that they're currently looking at. And Europe now is where a lot of people are now looking for, in terms of, client for their product.
Okay. Awesome. Digital.
I could go for that one. We talked for capital, we talked that there's an issue with AI and blockchain being overvalued, and the tariffs and other current things are exacerbating this issue. But there's also an opportunity in competitive open source markets as as well as the potentially improving the transparency and efficiency in domestic AI automation and capabilities. We didn't one. It was noted that the tariffs are affecting like end users, which, depending on how that rolls out, could be a risk or an opportunity. And also an issue of hardware sourcing. And one other thing was brought up is that the importance of data development, which currently is in need.
Yeah, we seem to undervalue data in some cases. Is that a fair statement, Stacey? I think that was Stacey.
Yeah, or even the using infrastructure or other means to create that data.
Okay. All right, water and waste.
Yes, thank you. So for market, we really talked about diversifying markets outside the US for water treatment and monitoring technology, especially with sales, because many water tech companies look at the US for sales. So this creates also an opportunity to diversify the sales strategy. Then the other one, it's also like market. The US will be looking to Canada for water. And so this can be very political in the future. So that's just a flag for us to keep in mind. Then when we look at talent, one innovator stated that accessibility to government resources should be facilitated because they often don't know where to look for what, and to have a bit more guidelines on how to get support and access to resources. And the last one, that's an other, is water pricing to incentivize water tech adoption. We don't pay for water, so there is not really an incentive to save water. But the moment we pay for money, we can save money if we save water. So that was our last point. Thank you.
Amazing. All right, we're at time. So I hope everyone here can see sort of what we're trying to do. We're starting conversations. None of this is final or finite. We'll just continue to consolidate, these concepts. Even with the water pricing, that's quite a different sort of body of work that needs to be led by someone, on the policy government side. But then when you look at something like, marketing, attracting US capital, to our startups, that's a whole different narrative, right? Even though they're connected in terms of market development and, how investors can get an ROI on their investment. So thank you so much for coming. We will do our best to take notes. If my team can just put some of these great notes here in the Future Economy Summit chat, that would be awesome. We hope to see you next week. Spread the word. It's going to be a lot of connections and fun breakouts next week as well. And me less talking. Thank you. Have a great day. Chat soon. Bye.